What if oil prices suddenly shot up to $150 a barrel? That's not just a number you see on a financial news ticker. It's a shockwave that would ripple through the entire global economy, affecting everything from your daily commute to the price of groceries. It sounds extreme, right? But in times of intense geopolitical tension, especially when conflicts flare up in the Middle East, this isn't just a hypothetical scenario. It becomes a real possibility that analysts and governments have to take very, very seriously. So how could this actually happen? Well, the global oil market is incredibly sensitive. Think of it like a finely tuned machine, and any disruption can throw it completely off balance. One of the biggest fears right now is the expansion of conflict across major oil-producing regions. This could directly threaten the physical supply of oil and, just as importantly, the routes used to transport it. Let's zoom in on one specific location, the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway is arguably the most critical choke point for global energy. About a fifth of the world's daily oil supply passes through it. If this route were to be blocked or even just perceived as unsafe for a short period, the market reaction would be swift and severe. Prices wouldn't just creep up, they would skyrocket. Why so fast? Because oil markets don't just react to what's happening now, they react to what might happen tomorrow. They price in risk, and they do it almost instantly. The moment military action escalates near a major energy hub, traders go into overdrive. Buyers rush to secure whatever supply they can get their hands on, worried about future shortages. Speculators jump in, betting that prices will go even higher, which in turn helps drive them up. It creates a feedback loop of fear and panic buying. You might be thinking, can't other countries just pump more oil to fill the gap? It's not that simple. Major oil producers, like the members of OPEC, might not have the spare capacity to immediately ramp up production by millions of barrels a day. Even if they do, they might be unwilling or unable to act if the conflict is happening in their own backyard, threatening their own stability and infrastructure. Regional instability makes everything more complicated and less predictable. So you have a situation where a sudden drop in supply meets strong, ongoing global demand. This tightening of the market is what sends prices climbing. And if investors and corporations start to believe that these disruptions aren't just a temporary glitch, but could last for weeks or even months, then the idea of $150 oil stops being a theoretical exercise. It becomes a very plausible and very worrying reality. The consequences would be felt everywhere. For you and me, it means paying a lot more at the gas pump. It means higher shipping costs for every product you buy, which companies will pass on to consumers. Airlines would face soaring fuel bills, leading to more expensive flights. For businesses, higher energy costs squeeze profits, potentially leading to layoffs and slower economic growth. For developing nations, it can be a devastating blow, making essential imports unaffordable and derailing economic progress. It is a stark reminder of how interconnected our world is and how events in one corner of the globe can have a direct impact on our daily lives. The stability of global energy markets isn't just an abstract economic concept. It's a foundation for the world we live in. That's why what happens in the Strait of Hormuz and other key regions matters to every single one of us. Have you ever wondered what would happen if the price of oil suddenly skyrocketed to $150 a barrel? It sounds like a headline from a disaster movie, but in today's volatile world, it's a scenario that economists and market watchers are taking very seriously. This isn't just about paying more at the gas pump. A price that high would trigger a cascade of economic shocks that would be felt in every corner of the globe, affecting everything from your grocery bill to your retirement savings. So, let's break down exactly what this means. $150 oil is what experts call a growth killer. At that level, energy is no longer just another expense. It becomes a massive brake on the entire global economy. The first and most obvious impact would be at the gas station. Imagine gasoline prices soaring to levels we've never seen before. For the average family, that means the cost of driving to work, dropping kids off at school, or running errands would become a major financial burden. eating into money that would otherwise be spent on other goods and services. But the pain wouldn't stop there. Think about how everything gets to you. The trucks that deliver food to your local supermarket, the planes that carry goods from overseas, the container ships that are the lifeblood of global trade, they all run on fuel. With oil at $150, transportation costs would surge dramatically. Shipping companies would have no choice but to pass these higher costs on to businesses, and those businesses would then pass them on to you, the consumer. Suddenly, it's not just gas that's more expensive. The price of your food would climb significantly. Modern agriculture is incredibly energy-intensive, from the fertilizer used to grow crops to the machinery that harvests them. Then you have the energy needed for processing, packaging, and refrigeration, not to mention the final delivery to the store. Each step in that chain becomes more expensive, leading to a broad and painful increase in food prices. This isn't just one sector feeling the pinch, it's a wave of inflation hitting us from all sides at once. This brings us to one of the biggest challenges, the dilemma for central banks like the Federal Reserve. Their primary job is to keep inflation under control. When prices are rising across the board, their go-to tool is to raise interest rates. Higher interest rates make it more expensive for people and businesses to borrow money, which cools down spending and, in theory, brings inflation back down. But here's the problem. In a $150 oil scenario, the economy is already being squeezed. Households are already struggling with higher living costs. Raising interest rates further would be like hitting the brakes on a car that's already slowing down. It would make mortgages more expensive, weakening the housing market. It would discourage businesses from investing and expanding. It would make car loans and credit card debt more costly, further reducing consumer spending. Central banks would be trapped between a rock and a hard place. Fight inflation and risk pushing the economy into a recession, or support the economy and risk letting inflation run wild. There are no easy answers here. Now, let's talk about the stock market. You'd see a major split. On one side, big energy companies, the ones pulling the oil out of the ground, would be swimming in profits. Their stock prices would likely soar. But for almost everyone else, it would be a very different story. Airlines, for example, would be in a world of trouble. Fuel is one of their biggest expenses, and a price spike of this magnitude could push many into financial distress. Companies that rely heavily on consumer spending, like retailers, restaurants, and car manufacturers, would also suffer as people tighten their belts. Investors would react to this uncertainty by running for cover. We'd likely see a massive shift away from riskier stocks and toward so-called safe haven assets. This means money would flow into things like gold, which has historically been a hedge against inflation and instability. Government bonds, especially from stable countries like the United States, would also become more attractive. We'd also see a move toward defensive sectors, companies that sell things people need regardless of the economic climate, like utilities and healthcare. The overall market would become extremely volatile, with big swings up and down as investors try to navigate the chaos. Faced with this crisis, governments would almost certainly step in. One of the first moves would be to tap into strategic petroleum reserves. These are huge stockpiles of crude oil that countries hold for emergencies just like this. Releasing millions of barrels from these reserves can temporarily increase supply and help bring prices down, or at least stop them from rising further. Governments might also try other short-term fixes like suspending gas taxes to give consumers some relief at the pump. However, these are just temporary solutions. Strategic reserves are finite, and they can't solve a long-term supply problem. If the high price of oil persists for months, the risk of a global recession becomes incredibly high. Think of expensive energy as a giant tax on the entire world. It drains purchasing power from consumers and businesses, slowing down economic activity everywhere. Both developed nations and emerging economies would be hit hard. For developing countries that are heavily dependent on imported energy, the consequences could be devastating, potentially leading to social and political unrest. So the big question is, what could actually push oil to $150 a barrel? The answer lies in geopolitical conflict and supply disruptions. We've seen it before. A major conflict in a key oil-producing region, like the Middle East, could instantly take a significant amount of supply off the market. If a critical shipping lane, like the Strait of Hormuz, were to be blocked, it would create panic. The key thing to understand about oil markets is that they are driven by both physical supply and fear. The price isn't just about how many barrels are being produced today, it's about how many barrels traders think will be available tomorrow, next week, and next month. During a war or a major crisis, confidence shatters. The fear of a wider conflict or a longer supply disruption can cause prices to move far faster and higher than anyone expects. Traders start bidding up prices to secure future supplies, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of scarcity. Ultimately, whether we see $150 oil depends on a fragile balance. It hinges on how far a conflict might escalate, how long any supply disruptions last, and whether diplomatic efforts can successfully de-escalate tensions and restore stability. In a world where one event can have global repercussions, the price of oil remains a powerful indicator of our collective economic health and geopolitical stability. It's a number that affects us all, and one we should all be watching. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this breakdown helpful, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the forces shaping our world. See you next time.